NASA's long-hidden warning from Mars. The rise and fall of man. The war of wars. The impending ending of Father Sky and Mother Earth. The near-dead trees of life and knowledge. Wake up and make up, world. Our future is in our past, with no escape present.
So this is a recorded conversation with Bart Jordan and Jonathan Mark around 10 p.m. on April 9th, 2017. It's regarding a one-page insert that we plan to show on YouTube, and Bart Jordan is going to describe all the information that's on that one page. Thank you, Bart.
You're welcome, sir. Unfortunately, this is the way we have to handle it because of activities that have been affected with relation to myself and my work. But I'm not here to speak about the devils. I'm here to speak about the angels. I think that what needs to be said, however, from the beginning, 3 of the earliest angels in my life were my grandfather, Carl Wilhelm Schwing, pronounced by most of America in relation to our cousins, Schwinn. They made bicycles, much beloved by the country, and my mother, Barbara Schwinn, who was America's foremost woman illustrator. All the others were guys. Now, that being said, the second person, and by the way, my grandfather was eldest of 13, only 2 sisters in the lot, so he had his hands full. In any event, because it usually went to the first child to be training all the others. Very German family in all too many ways. Now, he was a master linguist. Most anybody in the family would not have been able to tell you that except for myself. He got this from his mother, who was a nurse, but who knew 10 languages, which she passed to him, and he, by the time I was 7, had gotten me to embrace 7 of them. The oldest of which was ancient Greek, very ancient Greek. Now, I began to receive things that I didn't understand in 1942, age 5. Overwhelming. I didn't know why, but I didn't question the fact that I was, as my grandfather's Indian friend said, who gave me my Greek name, by the way, and said I had come before and I would come again, as I'm here at this point. And the thing was that I recognized that I was a samanamas, a word which doesn't exist in Greek any longer, if it ever did beyond the Periclean period, if even then. Saman namas. One language keeps the first part of it, and that is the Mayan language. It refers to the direction north, and that belongs to the mother, and that is the mother goddess, who is Aphrodite, but most people pronounce it Aphrodite. And I used to say without her nighty, just because I was a naughty child and had to stick their faces in the facts of the pronunciation. But in any event, that's the angel number 1 for me, my mother's father. Angel number 2 was my sister, 4.5 years older, but probably looking 4 times that today younger than myself. She absolutely is ageless. Janine, which I called Jenny when I was a child. And the family began to adopt that, I think, or perhaps it was already there. I don't know. But in any event, she was a very sickly child, but still found ways to defend her baby brother at every turn of the road. Very courageous, very remarkable, and she grew to be a rather strong person, despite all, and had 4 wonderful children, and is still highly productive at her advanced age. In any event, and still beautiful. Now, the third person was the family maid, Scots English. Her father was Scots, and she favored him for sure in her speech. Her mother, English. And she came to my family a year before I was born. She was more of a mother to me than my own, who was too busy doing what she had to do in the commercial world to make that crash through the glass ceiling, as they say, and emerge foremost in America. Now, just under Norman Rockwell, I think. But in any event, she had many, many, many friends, and a great number of them were very, very wealthy people. Most particularly, and I will mention this devil, was Alfred Lee Loomis, first cousin and like a very much younger brother to Henry Stimson, Secretary of War. I won't tell you what transpired from there, except it was both an opening of doors and a closing of same in my life. Now, the thing is, I just mentioned the 3 principal angels in my existence, and I do mean that. There was a 4th one, who was my Irish nanny. And oh my goodness, Christine Hurley. She has to be a light of my life, because she had that wonderful capacity that the Irish have, and no one who knows them would deny it. They can, in the very most serious of oppressive times, have a sense of humor which was surpassing. My father had a bit of it himself. But I think that the major thing for me was she was there as a steadying hand in the times that I was flagged, worn out, fatigued, with sleepless nights over things that oftentimes came through the nights, having these 16-digit numbers and the like thrown into the mix when I had not a clue as to what they meant. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you that at the top of the page, this 8.5 by 11, like a tear or crib sheet that I would pass out at the university, because I guest lectured in 5 different departments. That's kind of a record, but I didn't mean it to be. I was just trying to help the students join the dots. I did so over a period of over 40 years. Never asking for anything, as I never did. Even as a soldier, I took my salary, but when I came out, I did not ask for the GI Bill. I put myself through university. And that's enough to be said about that. But there is a 16-digit number at the top beginning 5719. You can imagine that when I looked at that and the numbers that followed, I didn't have one bloody idea in hell what they referred to. But after a while, I got an image of something that kept mushrooming up from the ground. It seemed to me something that was divided into 2 major parts. One was a bubble within a bubble, and that was in the ratio of 6 followed by 9, total 15. So it turned out that I worked out the measure in my mind according to something that was uniquely Greek. And this was possible because at 5 I began to study in earnest every bit of ancient Greek I could get my hands on, including cutting my teeth, if it will be said, on the Iliad and the Odyssey, which my grandfather provided. And I was faced with something that was a daunting task, but I had at my elbow German and English, Liddell and Scott, in the English case, lexicons of tremendous aid. Just about everything was there that needed to be there except Saman Namas. Those letters in Greek that make that up, of which, as I said, only the one word exists in mine, meaning north, belonging to the mother, north and winter, and so on, and intense cold. I knew this much about it, that the namas was a reciprocal resonance feature, but that in either case, on one side of the decimal point would be 292, and on the other side, the same. So in other words, it added to 584, which is the synodical revolution of the planet Venus. In other words, the apparent motion of where it appears in the sky 584 days later. Actually, more accurately, 583.921. But most people are not prepared to look at what that could possibly mean or say with relation to such a refinement. But it definitely is female, and that's the point. She is the female amongst all the males in the heavens. She also is the person to whom Ares was attached. Ares is known in the Latin as Mars, god of war. Well, originally he was just a nice fellow who was a father. She was just a nice lady who was a mother. But their sons were Phobos and Deimos, fear and terror or rout. It's been said to be many things. But the sister in the middle was Harmonia, harmony. She kept these striving brothers apart. Originally, the entire family were horse form individuals, but that's a long time ago. And she had a sister, which nobody suspected, and her name was Ainomra. Now, if you listen to that carefully, it's Harmonia from the other end, Ainomra. And she represents the other part of the equation that is often presented but unseen as being presented. You just have to know it's there. In any event, what is the first number, the 529.460, is the number of meters wherein the altitude is 110 and the base is 202. In that first 6 milliseconds, remember, millisecond implies a thousandth of a second. That is the first orb you see, and it achieves 180. And that's the first time. 9 milliseconds later, that no man's land between comes to 15 milliseconds. But you see it in the equation, because 529.460 is followed really by 180.180. So it gives it to you. And then the answer at 15 milliseconds, it advances to 709.640 meters. wherein the altitude is 140 meters and the base is 280. And there is the first point of alert that is offered so that you can see it. You, the human race. You, the stewards of the planet. You, the people who are chosen to speak for all the others. And that's the problem. You're not speaking for the others. You're speaking for yourselves and what you feel the power of knowing these things allows you to do. How wrong you are. How very wrong you are. And the power is what was brought to mind when I went running to my grandfather and I said, trying to be a good child within the confines of the church my father belonged to, which was the Roman Catholic Church, because he was a devout Catholic. And I went running to my grandfather, who was a Lutheran, and said, who killed Jesus? The Romans or the Jews? And my grandfather said, neither. That word stuck in my mind. Neither. Was I that wrong in what I read, what I thought I understood? Moments later, and it seemed like a century, he said, power killed Jesus. This being Roman or Jewish is of no true consequence. Power killed Jesus, and power will continue to plague you for the whole of your life. You, this Samanamas. Chronos metros oidos. Time measures singer. This is your destiny. I'm sorry. Well, I'm sorry too. But here we are in this sorry state looking at the first number I was introduced to and having to determine what it was. So there it is, the prediction of the Trinity test. And I was therefore the core mathematician of the atomic test. This was the 239, but stood equally to the 235. I gave the atomic weights for the 235, the 237, the 238, and the 239. But I said that 235 was not to be used for anything because it was the only one that had a reciprocal resonance in the numbers which represented it, all 9. They meet themselves coming back if you know how to set it up. We need this for later, I told them. And I made no bones about it. I said, do not use it. Some pressed me to say why. I said, I have told you all you need to know. Don't use it. They did. That was the Hiroshima. That was the Hiroshima. And there was less than 1%. And it was fissionable in nature. But it was where man was supposed to stop. He didn't. I remember that the scientist who was probably more the reason why Alfred Loomis was able to do what he did, Dr. Robert Wood, much older man, certainly altogether much wiser, and a man who could put his fingers down on almost any area of scientific pulse and determine whether it were healthy or not. An amazing gentleman and another angel. He really was the person who wrote a definitive article on high frequency, and his student, if you will, at that stage was Alfred Lee Loomis. His much older cousin, as I've said before, but like a brother to him in just about every way, was Henry Stimson. His mother, Alfred's mother, was a Stimson. And there was close order in that family. Very close order. And Stimson, Secretary of War, never knew about me except as the code name I chose myself, Brat. And the Brat file had a number, which was later discovered in his antics at Los Alamos. Richard Feynman by name. And that file number was 4312. Unmatched by any other, leading up to it or leading away from it, which Richard Feynman wanted to know. And finally, when Challenger happened, and I couldn't possibly be taken in if they had known enough to even do that in the Rogers Commission, because I knew Krista McAuliffe, and we weren't truly friends, but as teachers, we had come into contact with each other, and I was helpful to her because she was such a sparky, spunky girl, and I much admired her way of thinking of things. And so I let her know some very vital things. Now, Robert Wood was the one who defended me when I exposed certain things to a very august group of scientists gathered in the study, and it really was a private study, within the East Hampton Library, of which his wife was chief librarian, and that was Morton Pennypacker. I've covered these things in other things that we've spoken with the events. But perhaps I never said I had angels in that room, too. One of them, the closest to me in ways that mattered in the particular Trinity event, was George Kiszczykowski, the former Cossack. One hell of a good guy, and with a great sense of humor. He had trouble believing me at first, as did many. Only Robert Wood seemed to have that understanding from the beginning. But without going into the details, because there are many, Robert Wood, George Kiszczykowski, and for much of the time, not all the time, Ernest Lawrence, and Carl Compton, president of MIT, whose brother, Arthur Holly, they used to call him Hollywood because he was a good-looking man, Compton, who gave us the Compton effect, in effect. Okay, so these people were principal, but the most principal individual was Pennypacker himself. I think the title of his book, George Washington's Spies in New York and on Long Island, or something of that order. He gave me an inscribed copy, which unfortunately the Dover Housing Authority people destroyed along with so many other things, or removed and did whatever with it. I no longer have it. Had a little inscription in it with, of course, no name, saying to the smallest soldier of the greatest conflict. I valued that in the book immensely. Now, he also prevented things from getting out of hand, along with Robert Wood. Just his presence alone was pretty helpful, because everybody respected him. And of course, we were using his quarters, where I finalized all the drawings that went into the Trinity test, the result of which was July 16 in 1945 at 5:29 and 46 seconds, matching exactly the meters in the first 6 milliseconds. They have said they didn't know what it was. That's pure hokum. Malarkey, if you will. 5:29 and 46 seconds, not 45. The government has this way of shaving points, adding points, doing all kinds of things to distort the facts. But if you take that set of numbers at the top of the page, you turn it on end, either one, and add it across. For example, if you turn it so that the figure of the test is upside down, you will now have the line reading 715, followed by 082, followed by 909, and so on. It's going to add to 2806 when you're done. You turn it up the other way, so the zeros at the top, and you start again. Of course, adding the zeros is going to come to 0. But then you're following 684, 416, 909, and so on. It too adds to 2806. When the scientists saw that, they realized that it was over. It balanced from all directions. That could not be an accident. And Dr. Wood, finally, out of patience, said, "This child to my right is correct. Let's look at the rest of it and get on with it. We have no time to do otherwise." And he was very forceful and very immediate and very, as I say, clear in his speech. Now, the first thing you will see underneath that, by the way, I did one with the footage, and it too matched on the ends. The numbers there were 4602 on either end. So once the footage was in front of them, where could they go? It matched from both ends in a separate system, but it wasn't separate, and this is what they didn't understand. The metric was lunar. The footage was solar. It was a lunar solar system that was intact for thousands of years, and perhaps millions. We don't know. But the first thing that you will see is an equation. It's got a sidebar there of 2035, 4312 in negative, and then 2277 positive. Well, that's Harmonia in terms of her orbit around fifth moon of Uranus, so-called, wrongly named, per usual, but it is her orbit the Greeks had in mind. And the 2277 is obvious. That's Phobos and Deimos together. 4:59 minutes, the fastest thing in the solar system, and 18:18 minutes for Deimos. 2277, probably one of the most encountered figures of all in the celestial doings. In any event, you will see beside that something that says 124.530. Well, below that, 045, 190, and then 195.634. Those would not immediately register, except that they do add up to 365.354. Couldn't be clearer. The solar year is the 365. The lunar year is the 354. There's the basis for your yin-yang, or if you will, coming from the side, that it's 365, your yang-yin. Now, down below, at midpoint, you see 1 followed by 124.53, a 0, 45.19, an 8, and then 178.634, followed by an 8. That 2 adds to 365.354. But what does it do that the other doesn't, even though it's generated from there? Well, the 124 is in Aramaic and Hebrew. It was an adopted story. I don't believe it to be Hebrew in the beginning. No, I don't. I'm sorry if that offends. It shouldn't, because Aramaic is really Chaldean. And even if it were adopted as late as the Babylonian captivity, it definitely is adopted, because Hebrew was not developed enough to have had it except in the literary form at a later date. But the 124 is the number that applies to Eden. You spell it out in the Hebrew, no difference there. Or the older Aramaic, it's 124. The 53, which is on the other side of the decimal point, is garden. So there are 2 out of the 6 words, really, the last 2 being doubled, is what you need to know. Now, what's the 45, followed by the 19 after the decimal point? That's Adam, that's Eve. And then the 178 is life tree. The 634 is knowledge tree. That's it, folks. That's where your story is generated from. And the 1088 is really a spine line that takes you back to the original formula, where it was 195 instead of 178. Add it for yourself. It's 17 plus 178, which indeed is 195. Now, the older thing, the initial thing, is Greek. That which follows is Aramaic. But remember, the Chaldean astronomers were in touch with the Greek astronomers at a point of antiquity which is scary. It's way back there. And what is the 1088 really telling us? That is the speed of sound at sea level, 1,088 feet per second. And if you divide it into 4 for north, east, west, and south, typical yin-yang operation, that's 272 each time, isn't it? And 272 is harmony. Well, sound is omnidirectional. So it's the speed of sound at sea level at 1,088. It happens to be the difference in days between the solar year, properly accounted, and the lunar year. These guys thought of everything, and we have thought of nothing in our attempts to skirt the fact that we are merely pygmies standing on the shoulders of giants. Now, that being said, what is underneath there? The 1932, followed by the 253, followed by the 12, followed by the 1. Well, back up from the bottom, and you've got it. 1 is the inch, 12 is the foot, 253 repetitions, over 1932. Now, of the 1932, I will explain the 1932 later, but not here. All you need to know is it is the major increment of that full site on Mars. And that tells you everything, because you will see it going in the opposite direction below that which is in the middle. Well, what's the monkey in the middle? 15693, followed by 27802, followed yet again by 12109. I'm sorry, folks. That, for those of you who do not know anything that is going on with the Greek, and I'm most sorry for Greeks who should know, that is the number of lines in Greek. Never mind translations. You're going to go way off if you try that. But looking at the Greek itself, Homer is obliged to follow a pattern. Homeros, tuflos, oídos. Homer, blind. And the oídos is singer. All right. This blind singer gives us 15,693 lines in the Iliad, 12,109 in the Odyssey, and the center, which is the addition of both, the 27802, could not be clearer. Wakey, wakey world. Wakey, wakey world, especially you Greeks. The 2 is a solar 2. The 780 is the apparent motion of Mars, the synodic figure of Mars. What we see from Earth and where it appears the same place in the sky, 780 days. You can nitpick and say, well, blah, 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 but don't do it, because the whole figure is 780 by agreement throughout the world. And the 2 following is, of course, the lunar 2. But there's your message. We're talking about a theater where something took place. So that's the median thing, the center thing, the fulcrum, if you will. The 1932, the 253, the 12, the 1 is flanked on either side, and it looks sort of like a bow tie in a way. But in any event, what's following? This is the one that truly shook me up as a child. I saw 235, 237, on the other side of the decimal point. Then 040.870. That did not register, except that it was 780 and 4th planet from the sun going the other way. So therefore it marked something very important, and I suspected and later showed that it was its location on Mars, 40.87 north. But what was beyond that? The 238 and then 239. So, again, checking my grandfather's very special books. He had a limited library, but with such a degree of concentration on the sciences as was very clear where he was going with it. The 235 was the isotope we were not supposed to use. We did. The 4087 was a location on Mars, but it could have been Earth, except it wasn't Earth. And it sort of said so if you knew how to read it. The 238 was the one where the abundance level was 99.2745. That 2745 was my figure, along with the 99%, coming from what I received. And what did the 2745 represent? 309 for Ares, Mars. 842 for Phobos. 272 for Harmonia. 329 for Deimos. And 993 for Aphrodite. Those figures all add to 2745. If you took the mirror, because Venus was known as the goddess of the mirror, amongst other things, because she was the goddess of beauty, but she was often shown with a mirror. And one day I was asked in class, why did she have the mirror? And I said, well, it only took her a moment to make up her face, but a millennium to make up her mind. And one girl somewhere in the class said, misogynist. And I said, you're right, girl. You're absolutely right. I am in this case because I'm trying to make a point. The world has a misogynistic attitude, and it's time to give it up. Aphrodite is not, or Aphrodite is not a vamp on a ramp, despite the wonderful story that addresses her interaction with ice, caught in this magical net by her volcanistic husband, Hephaestus, to become the laughing stock of the gods and goddesses. Yes, I think that we have to go back and realize that these stories were quite effective little things because they gave us the picture if we bothered to look and take it in. But of course, we oftentimes only go a portion of the distance, and the expression as we had it as children, you'd keep taking out the distance that you need to go and you'll never get there. Well, quite technically true. Now, you see that the thing is all a result of the division and the multiplications applied against that initial number I received. And then another 16-digit number was utilized there as well. These are scary for a child, and even scary for adults, I'm sure. But you have to contend with them. You have to understand what they're saying and doing. Because they just gave you a summary here of the history of man. And Robert Wood had a very trenchant statement concerning that. But it's true. You have the story of Eden and the expulsion. Why do you suppose that happened? Because we defied the rainbow. And that was taken up in Genesis 9:13, quite removed from where it should be in a sense. And then the complete sight down to the inch, that's all 92.5 plus miles. That's all of it, as pictured. Now, there is a summary of that. Because if you take where photo 35A72, and I have stressed time and time again, the A just means Viking 1. It's the 35th orbit, the 72nd frame. And then followed by the 70th orbit and the 13th frame. But the point is, those are not just numbers on photos. Those are orbital positions which I gave NASA. In fact, the basis for the entire Viking 1 and its shadowcraft Viking 2. Now, I think that that summary is so clear because you have the Eden story, you have the Trojan War, smack in the middle, and you have our return to what led to our expulsion in terms of the tree of knowledge. But the tree in the Aramaic would give you one reading, and the knowledge would give you another. And in the knowledge one is the withheld secret in the Manhattan Project. I guarantee you the government doesn't want me speaking even now. They've done as much as they could to make sure that I wouldn't. And it has, on several instances, very nearly resulted in the loss of life. I'm a little partial there, because it's my life. But actually, I don't really care about me. I never have. I entered into very hazardous duty, which if LeMay, the general, had known it, I doubt he would have let me do it. Too good a general. He would have said, no, you're too valuable. But he didn't know. And I made damn sure he didn't. I also didn't let him know the attempt on my life, which was probably the most effective attempt because it tied me down in a maternity ward, and no GI could tell a story like that if not true. In maternity ward for 46 days, which I guarantee you they don't give you for the kissing disease back then, infectious mononucleosis and the accompanying problems. Now, to the left of that august column, which has all of the necessary balance points in red, 177.18 taken twice is the 100-year period, and that would be the 50-year period, therefore, of the lunar year. That's obvious. The 687, of course, is sidereal Mars, followed by the 47. What else do you describe the moon as except silver? 313, well, that's a reading of the 1088, except by the 12th root of 2, in a metric form, which is altered by the 12th root of 2. And you'll notice that they're balanced by the same numbers on the other side. So these tumblers match head on. And yet all the numbers are reciprocal resonant numbers. They're all, from the top to the bottom, equalized in black, going from the opposite direction, accounting for a force we don't even know is there, except by virtue of what the numbers do. And the center, the fulcrum, 4, 6, 2, 3, 5. Make no mistake about it, especially you in the Greek world. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you do not want to look into it in the depth you should. The 4, the 6, the 2, the 3, the 5 is alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon in the original stroke count that made it up. Hear that. That was the seat of Greek learning. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon. I don't know. It gets me very frustrated. But then to the left of that, as I started to say, there are numbers that would not be familiar to you, but they certainly are to one air policeman who witnessed the Rendlesham Forest incident, the only truly fully explored and documented UFO. The one that did everything except turn on its head and do a little dance. The 9.8, 9.8, 9.8 are the impressions he took in footage of the 3 items that allowed the craft to settle down evenly, dead evenly, as an equilateral event. One of the scientists who reviewed that laughed at what the air policeman did, said it was stupid, because, after all, no fully triangular craft could do what they claimed. It had to have at least an isosceles construction. Now, I had said to expect this craft, if we kept tampering with doing such things as exploding devices in the Van Allen belts. Also a name given to someone who, while he was a good teacher, and I went to the trouble to find that out, was also a ruddy pirate, as so many of them are. But he let other people do the dirty work. Those numbers were recorded in 4312. And so was the nature of the craft. So what are the numbers? No one seemed to understand what it was. So here it is in brief, and it's very brief. 9.8 times 9.8 times 9.8 is the number that you see, and the dividing sign is there to clue you, but I didn't have any place to put it other than the way I did. 941.192. Well, the 192, of course, you wouldn't recognize at all. The 192 is Mariam. That's right, the Mariam of the Queen of Heaven. And also Mariam Magdalene, Mary Magdalene. She was a Samanamas along with her partner, Jesus Nazaraios, which doesn't mean Jesus of Nazareth. Please stop saying that, Christian world. It's Nazarene. In other words, it's a faith, a sect designation based on the velocity of light. No way is it other than the title of a Samanamas, as is Mary Magdalene. And whether or not she were his wife, she certainly was his partner. And that was expressed in the names being exactly the same length in Greek. Notice that, please, because it's also the same division that applies to the Trinity test in 45. 6 milliseconds followed by 9 milliseconds. These are not accidents, folks. This is something you need to understand. But you need to have the courage to understand it. So let's look at what happens with the 941, the 192. It's reverse, 291 and 149. It is a code operation wherein the three numbers that are red give it you. 68 is a combination of 27, 22, 19. What's that? The impossible dimensions of what was supposed to be and supposed to be the dimensions of a spherical object, and yet they looked more like potato in form. And the one on the other side, 38, 15 by 12 by 11. They have multiples too. But what's in the middle of 1467, which is a combination of synodic Mars at 780 and sidereal Mars at 687. Total, 1467. So, in consequence, it's Mars and it's two moons. What do you need? Looky, looky, wakey, wakey. It's time. Stop it. Stop playing this game of hide and seek with yourselves. You're scientists. Behave like it. Those that can, and the rest of you. The rest of you waiting people for someone to do something right. Move in the direction of reduction, very serious reduction of things which are nuclear, because it'll take us out again. It did once before, and it will again. Trust yourselves. Get behind the truth, not behind the lies, and not behind all of the political manipulations done by the power sources in this land. We have Russian oligarchs. We have American oligarchs. And we have a president who is surrounded by people who love war. That's because we've never been in one. I spoke today to one of our townsmen that is a very fine young man. And his sister is mayor of this town, with no teeth, I might add. And he volunteered what I already knew. His father was in the Second World War in a company of men. At the end of the campaigns of which he was a part in Europe, he and one other person was left out of that company. He and one other person. Let me repeat that. This is a story I have known many times over in many different ways. I was only a little boy, a very little boy, asked to do what I did. And I've lived to regret it. in certain ways because they didn't obey the rules. They wanted me to obey the rules, but Dr. Wood said, never, never sign a security document for the United States. You, your family, your friends, and everybody will come under its effects. Just take what comes yourself. And if there's a gag order in effect, obey it for as long as you feel you need. But you can never be bound except by point of honor. And if there is no honor, you will have to step forward and say what you know and tell what you know. Well, the time is way past doing. So this is what this moment in time has brought about. And again, if it weren't for the activities that have been brought against me for the last 19 years, I've lived in Dover Public Housing Facility with all the damages, the thefts, the putting of my life on hold while medicines had to be recovered because they were summarily destroyed. Stories that no one would believe and reads like a bad novel. But I've had enough. And my fellow veteran who's tried to help me, yet another angel, Albert J. Michaud, Jr., the son of an Irish mother and a French-Canadian father, except he was born here. But I tell you, this little man who picked up Dover, the city of Dover, for virtually 20 years. And people saw this little guy attempting to be Superman in what he did. What's his thanks? Well, it was a proclamation. And I kept my mouth shut, but I did say to the city councilman and the mayor in the hall, far rather than receiving the keys to the city, you'd rather have the keys to the dumpsters. But even that's risky because he could get nailed for putting things in there and stealing services or whatever the expression is on the part of these ever so smart lawyers who seem not to be able to answer questions or take stands in ways that they should. But as I said, to the most recent encounter with one of its lawyers who's the head of housing today. You guys, so many of you are the same. You all must complain the cards ill shuffled till you have a good hand. I have to thank Jonathan Swift for that. But in any event, what I'm saying here is that this is a sacrifice piece we're putting up, but I've had it. I love this country. I love this town. And I love certain people in this town who have done rightful things. But the wrongful ones have forced me to do this in a way I would have not, or I would not have chosen to do. Now, that is there, let me point out one other thing. On the harmony of spheres, which is actually semispheres, is a figure which outlines the five-sided pyramid, the apex of which is at 4087 north. Nature doesn't make five-sided pyramids. No, it doesn't. But it probably is the most prominent thing in the picture of both, and I stress that, 3572 and 7013. There are a host of formulas that back up this piece, but this is the summary one that Dr. Wood chose to present that day, where they either went forward or they again lollygagged about while they scrapped and fought with each other over this, that, and the other. I don't know what to say except that there were others that played a unique role. Tanya Proskuriakov at Harvard, Mater Familias, her mother, head of the family of Maya studies, an absolutely brilliant woman. And of course, Rosalind Franklin for me. And I'm sorry that she passed away. So she really was a guiding light for me because, yes, she pioneered the physical DNA, but I brought something before her that only after very deep thought and sustained concern did she recognize the spiritual DNA, which is concomitant and present in some anomalous people. We're rare. We are, because we cannot benefit ourselves monetarily. I'm suspicious of the or I suspect, let's put it this way, and I'm superstitious about it. I think my powers would be removed. In any event, I also say that what I have to do now, I've had to do primarily because housing destroyed everything I did for 62 years and many things that are irreplaceable. 27 October 2004, and I've been trying to come back through that loss for all these years. But my time is running out. I'm 80 years of age. How much longer can I last, especially with the deficit of what was done to me in 56? I want to not call attention, as I say, more than I've already done, to the devils. But one of the things that sticks in my craw is one person here in Dover Housing, a former Dover policeman, who ended his being a policeman 7 years ago, I understand. When he was in the Air Force, it took him 8 years, according to a statement I had to virtually drag from him, to achieve 3 stripes, which I did in 18 months. I'm sure somewhere along the line he's hostile over that event. I don't know for sure, but I think he consoled himself along the way that I was a college boy, and I wasn't. When I went to college, I did not do so on the GI Bill. I paid for it myself. And it was not an easy event to meet because I had a wife and 2 children. They knew nothing of what I did. They still know almost nothing of what I did, and I don't think they'd want to. But in any event, at this point, I have to say that what you have in front of you to consider is whether you as a populace out there, and the scientists amongst you have no excuse, none whatsoever, get this thing looked at and remember something here. You have a responsibility above all else and all others with your education and your skills. Take a hold of this event and recognize you either go down that nuclear road with further armaments, which we don't need, further developments of things nuclear, which we don't need, or we stand back and begin the reduction of armaments, which is long overdue. We could take the lead in the world of doing the right thing for a change. I remember Harry Truman at one point looking at the House Un-American Activities Committee. He said, it's the most un-American thing in America. I agree. And I also have a member of my family, Conrad Jordan, who was a Democrat when most of the family were Republicans. Most all were Republicans. And he stood out, and Grover Cleveland asked him to be Treasurer of the United States. He did so unwillingly. He didn't want to be in Washington. He didn't like Washington. He loved New York. He was a New Yorker. But at the end, his work wasn't done. So when the Republicans came in, they begged him to stay as assistant treasurer. Again, reluctant, but a dutiful American. He met the moment and did it. That's what I was raised with. You just do it. You just do it. But I am tired. I am disappointed in my countrymen, especially the scientists. I'm sorry to nail you for what you have not done, but this angel in my existence right now, Alfred J. Michaud Jr., a man who has self-educated himself for the most part, is being impacted. He is reaching, as Thomas Paine once spoke of, even in relation to the British Crown, the last stage of human weakness. We all do, unless we die first. But here's the point. He now needs assisted living, and without me, and they went for me, and the eviction was due to be the very day, I hope this will be released, his birthday, April 10th, wherein he'll be 87 years of age. 87 years of age. That's in another hour, he said, and that's considerable. Now, what I want, if I can, from this statement, I want it looked at as the effort of two thoroughly committed Americans, former soldiers, saying, please, wake up and do what you must by conscience, because you have been asleep for too long. And the oligarchs are making great time as you sleep. So please, prepare yourselves, because there's more that could have been given you and should have been given you long ago. But in recent months, many months, since we first cut the program of 4 or 5 hours, whatever is not on the cutting room floor, was cut September 7th. Look at the time lost to this bedbug jihad, where they put bedbugs in every room, every closet, every place they could, but mostly amongst my papers, so much so that the little nymphs were even crawling out of my calculator, which I have to use because my handwriting doesn't make it. People have to read what I do. So, as I say, I don't know how much of this will fit within the period allowed. But make no mistake about it. Something has to happen here. There are good people in this town, and both myself and Albert Michaud will be sorry to leave it. But we can't sustain under these conditions any longer. It's quite impossible. But that's not what I would like to end on. I have oftentimes said since a child, because it is something I said as a child, and I've never seen any reason to abandon it. Our future is in the past with no escape present. That I just walked us through will happen again. It's already in the process of doing that. What do you want to do to extend the life of this planet as stewards, rather than people who are studies in self-interest? Self-interest and self-perpetuation. This is not what America is about. And this is not allowing us to be the beacon of light before the world, which we should be for all those who have suffered in the effort to make it so. Damn it. Get on it. Good day.